This tinfoil is really jerking me around. Hold on. I got him going. Welcome back to the channel. If you're here, I assume it's one of two reasons. You like looking at my face, or you bought an absolute piss missile off Facebook Marketplace, and somebody left holes in the floor from their backyard roll cage install, and we're going to show you how to fix it. So if you got a project with a roll cage, in this case specifically, full frame vehicles, body on frame, not unibodies, the roll cage has to go through the floor and it connects to outriggers that go to the frame. In order to get the bars through the floor, you have to put some big nasty holes in the floor. In my opinion, the best way to fix it is to just buy patch panels for your specific vehicle, because they're already pre-fit. All you got to do is cut another hole in it, slightly smaller, to cover up your bigger hole you cut out in the first place. So there's a few ways to seal up your floor. You can hand fabricate some patches out of sheet metal. It's more time consuming, it's a little bit more difficult. And this is the result if you use a patch panel such as these from AMD. It saves a lot of time, costs a little bit more money, but in the end it's going to fit good. It's already meant for the floor. So let's show you the process of installing them. Yeehaw. So the reason we went with patch panels is simply because on the back side of these OBS trucks, where the down bar goes through, or the main hoop I should say, has very complicated bends in it that I don't feel like trying to replicate. So this is the easiest, fastest, cleanest way to get it done nicely. As you can see, somebody hacked the crap out of the floor. Wasn't me. And now I have to figure out how to cover it. There you go. So the first step in the process, when you get your patch panel, figure out what side it goes to. This is the right side. We've already done the left. And you're going to want to take down some very basic measurements. But there's one step you might have forgot, like I did. You need to prep your floorboards all around the tube, preferably before you ever put tube through it. There should be bare metal around where your bars were going to go down, or else you're going to suffer trying to get all that paint off around the tubes, trying to fit your grinder in a 1/2 inch area. Prep is key, do it first. Now let's get into making this patch panel. First step, take your patch panel, give her a look. You can see we have our body mount hole here, we have our body mount hole here, and it'll end right at the firewall. So this patch panel has a lip on the front, right where the firewall meets. We'll just take a rough measurement. We would need roughly 5 inches. You take your 5 inches, and then you simply just go to the end of your patch, go down 5 inches, mark it, and then for width, you do the same thing. We're not going to overlap this hole because there's a hole in this panel and there's no point. And we also have the original covers for this, so we're just going to re-seam seal them on. So take this measurement from your kick panel. We'll say, let's do it this way. We'll cut it big first. You can always trim it later. We'll cut her at 4 inches wide. Now before we get into the cutting part, wear protection. If you've ever been to the eye doctor and got your eyeball scraped because you had metal in it, you'll appreciate the protection because it hurts. But anyway, on top of cutting where we marked earlier, I'm also going to trim this inner edge. This is a full inner rocker panel replacement, and we will not be using this. I'll explain later what we do. So let's get to cutting. So here's our rough cut from the first patch panel, second patch panel. Here's the first patch panel. This is for the driver's side. Now you'll see some key differences. The rough cut one still has a large flange on the right side and the front side. This would be where it gets resistant welded to the firewall. Same for the kick panel rocker side. But we don't want those on there. And on the front side, we're actually going to reverse the lip, and I'm going to show you why now. So with the finished patch panels installed and the flange reversed, you can see how I have it up against the firewall instead of down in between the firewall and the floor pan like originally intended. The reason for that is if you had it the original way, you would have to weld both the floor, the firewall, and the patch all together, and you will never be able to grind out all the seam sealer that used to be there. It's going to cause a bad weld, it's going to look gross. So in my opinion, this is the best and easiest way to do this. So now that we've got our edges cut, trimmed up on this patch panel, I'm going to show you the next step. You need to start test fitting, but you'll notice it's really hard to test fit with this bar in the way. And if any of you guys watched my last video, you saw there was some math involved. So in this video, there's not going to be any math involved. You just need to butt your patch up. Start with the side or the front, doesn't matter. We're butting it up to the kick panel. We're going to take a Sharpie. We're going to find the center of our A-pillar bar, and we're going to mark it wherever you can get the marker. So you can see there's one giant mark. Then we're going to go to the front with the front of the patch, butt it up against the firewall, slide it to the tube, and then we're going to mark the center again. So what was the significance of these Sharpie marks? Essentially, all it does is give us a rough estimate of where the tube's going to land. We're not going to do anything crazy here. We're just going to roughly draw a straight line from our first mark from the firewall down, and then 90 degrees opposite to that from the kick panel over. We're going to mark another line, and right in the center is right where your tube's going to land. So next we need to drill a hole. Take it to Pound Town. I find it's easier to use a bit to start with. Now that we have a pilot hole, we're going to use a drill press and an 1.5" hole saw to get started. Now the other reason we used a pilot bit is because in order to use the drill press, we have to put the patch panel in upside down, and what that allows us to do without seeing our marks is now we can center up this hole saw with our pilot bit and start drilling. We've got a hole, but it's still not going to fit around the tube because the tube's solidly mounted through the floor, which means we're going to split it in half directly through the center of the circle. Now a good tip is you need to cut it in whichever way you can get your welder in the easiest, or whichever way has the shortest run, and I'll show you what I mean. So as you can see, on the patch panel we've already got fit and done. I cut it the long ways, and the reasoning for that was I'm going to MIG weld this, and it's going to be real hard to get the gun in between this bar and the kick panel. My finger actually is really tight in there, but it will fit under the tube right where my seam is. So that's where the seam was. And I'll be able to fit in the front of the bar up on the firewall side. When we get to the back, you'll see that we're actually going to cut it the opposite way. And I'll show you why it was easier to do it the opposite way on the back side. As you can see, we have split it down the middle with the world's straightest cut because somebody forgot to turn on grind mode on their welding helmet. Don't know who that was. Anyway, you'll find it is much easier to test fit now, but it still doesn't fit. I wonder why. So we used an 1.5" hole saw bit to get started, but this is 1 5/8 tube. So let's start with seeing where we need to trim off. First, I think we're going to take a little more off this bottom flange, and then we're going to open up this hole. Let's check the inside one. Not even close. So we got some more cutting to do. So, as you can see, I've trimmed up all the edges a little more, but we still have to enlarge this hole. Now, my favorite tool to do that is a die grinder with a drum sanding roll on it. This is an 1.5" roll, but I find it's almost a perfect fit for 1 5/8. This was an 1.5" hole saw bit, and you can see the 1.5" drum sander doesn't fit in there because it's actually closer to 1 5/8. So we're going to take this, make the hole bigger, test fit it, do it again, test fit it, do it again, test fit it, do it again until it fits right, and we'll show you that result. So now that we've made the hole bigger, we are gonna test fit it. Woo, that's hot. All right. So the tricky part with tubes going through a floor is if the floor's not flat and the bar isn't straight up and down at a 90, your hole is not gonna be a perfect circle. It's really gonna be oblong. So we got plenty of room on the inside, but the top edge and the bottom edge are touching. So I think what we're gonna do next is we're gonna fold this edge up in preparation for final fit. We're gonna run the drum sander through here a little bit more, but then we're gonna radius these edges. And keep in mind, you don't want this, so you can see right here, you don't want it to be an airtight gap. If you weld these patch panels to the roll cage, well, the cab's flexing and the chassis is flexing. They're going to be moving at different times, at different speeds. And this is going to flex, break. It's going to work hard in your floor pans. If you're not careful, it could even damage your roll cage. The only goal here is to keep air, debris, water, gas, fumes that could come in the hole out of the cab. So we want an air gap, and we're going to seal it with seam sealer because seam sealer is flexible and is going to be able to withstand the different movements from the cab to the chassis. So after we've got the holes pretty close, the panel still doesn't fit great because this original folded over flange is getting in the way. Now I'm going to try and show you how to do this without a bunch of special tools. Most of this has been done with a death wheel, a couple grinders. Technically, you don't even have to weld these in. You could panel bond them. We're just going to weld them because I want to be assured that they're not going to break off. Anyway, I'm just going to use vice grips and flip this flange all the way around. You could use a vise and a hammer, but we'll just use the vice grips. It works just the same. And at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to tell anyway. So that looks super disgusting, but we're going to fix it up with a hammer and the flat part of a vise. Or you could use a railroad tie, a thick piece of metal, probably a 2x4. I don't know. So take your hammer, find a hard piece of metal, now keep in mind, every time your hammer strikes your workpiece, hammer, workpiece, metal, every time you do this, you are stretching the metal. And as you can see, maybe, it is actually curving it. But in the end, it's going to come out just fine. So we're going to work it a little more, make sure it's nice and flat. Looking like something to me. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm here to show you the right way. I'm also here to show you my mistakes, so maybe it helps you along the way. As you can see, we have a gloriously perfect fitting patch panel here. But it is not from the patch panel we bought and made. Why is that, you might ask? Well, when you really get into grinding and you just zone out, you tend to overgrind. And I overground that hole by a lot, by an absolute mile. The inside piece actually fits pretty good, pretty perfect. But this piece, when it's butted up, leaves a huge gap between the bar and the patch panel. You're not fixing that with seam sealer. And we're not trying to be hacks around here. And because we only have one of each side, we had to hand make them. This is just out of simple sheet metal. It's no big deal. But you'll notice the bend on this is a little different than the patch panel. I'm going to show you another option. We bent it upwards so you could weld against the firewall and avoid catching any seam sealer in your weld that you couldn't get out. Your other option is to cut it short. So now we have a 1/4 inch gap from the firewall. We can weld this patch right to the floor, avoid sucking up any residual seam sealer into the weld, and in the end, it's still going to be a perfect patch panel. So just take your time, or else you have to do stuff twice. That's kind of my thing. Try not to do it. Anyway, let's go to the back side, because that side's even harder. And I'll try not to mess up this one. Alright, if you didn't catch the first video, it's a little rough around the edges. I just wanted to throw in a little explanation for the channel. If you're new here, we like to show start to finish on all the projects we're doing to the OBS. In this case, we're fixing holes in the floor. We don't want to be the people who just go, there's a hole in the floor, let's fix it. Alright, thanks for watching. We're done. Here's the finished product. I hope you learned something. Psych? You thought we were done, didn't you? No. We got more to go. So, I've showed you how to mess up a patch panel when you're impatient and rushing. So now, I'm going to show you how to do the hardest patch in this truck, but make sure it's spot on when you're done with it. So you can see I got all these goofy measurements on here. Well, I wouldn't hardly call those measurements, just drawings. But essentially, this one's complicated because it has multiple bends, the tube's at a 5.5 degree lean back, and it lands right on a radius on the floor pan. You can see how I've drawn out where the bar has to go through, and it doesn't actually go through in the circle. Because it's leaned back, it uses up more surface area. So the way we're going to figure this out without math is you can see where our patch panel ends. Right there. Just a hair under a 1/4 inch. So on our actual floor pan, we put roughly the same mark up there and across and to the outside of this B-pillar. All we did is take a ruler and shove it back there as far as you could. You draw a line going all the way across, and this is your reference line that's simulating this patch panel. The reason we took the Sharpie mark all the way out to the outside is because we want to measure distance. So we're going to take a bendable ruler, get on our Sharpie mark, and we're going to line it up with the end of this tube and right at 2¼ inches. So like the rest of the patch panels I showed you, when we got this set in here, you can mark your center line. This is the path the tube's going to travel. So that's your center. And we have a roughly 1 5/8" hole saw. That's what's going to be our template for the circle. These lines are just 1/2 inch 5/8 either side. I'm not going to do the math right now, you can figure it out. I drew a mark here, drew a mark here. This total is 1 5/8. We took our measurement, that was 2¼ to the front edge of our bar. Transfer that to our patch panel. 2 1/4, 2 1/4 in the center, 2 1/4 to the side. And then all we use this hole saw bit for was just to draw an outline. Now we have a visual template that we can trim and make sure we're not going off to one side or over cutting it like I did on the last piece. To do this, all I'm gonna do is take an air saw and I'm gonna trim well within my Sharpie marks and sneak up on it. Once this area is trimmed out, we'll get my favorite tool, the drum sander that I destroyed our last piece with, and we're gonna finish this out. So let's get to cutting. Now that we finally got that piece cut out, we're gonna very gently give her the drum sander treatment. Very gently. I'm not gonna come even close to the lines. We're just gonna smooth it out, because if this doesn't fit in there, I know for a fact that that bar won't fit in there. After you get your piece fit up, the next step in the process is to prep it to raw metal. My tool of choice is a Scotch-Brite pad on my right angle grinder. And after we get it all to bare metal, we are gonna sand it with a Harbor Freight, I don't know what this thing is, but it's able to get in all these bends and 90s that a typical orbital sander wouldn't be able to get into. Now, once you have the metal all prepped, you're ready for one final fit up. And we still have to make one more piece to go on the back side, but it's very simple. I'll show you on the driver's side. On these reproduction patch panels, there is E-coat on them. I ground all mine off simply because I don't always trust reproduction E-coat. You never know if there's surface rust behind it. I will leave it on the back side because it is a good rust protection. If you're MIG welding it, you don't have to worry about cleaning off the back side. It's going to weld just fine. Once you get the front side to bare metal, I like to take a sander, put some 80 to 180 grit scratches in here before you weld it in. That way when you're ready to seam seal and paint, it has something to stick to and you're not trying to sand in awkward positions. Now, once you have it all sanded up, you'll have good mechanical bond between paint and seam sealer after you weld it, and you don't have to worry about trying to jam that thing between the roll bar and the floor and your patch panel. Next steps, final fit up and welding. So, that little piece I was talking about that you have to add to the backside, come on, it's just a rectangle. We use the same processes we have for every other patch panel, and because you have so much of the inner rocker left over, you can just cut this chunk out of it. It's just a rectangle, way more simple than this. Come on. And it just slides over top. Maybe it fits too good. There we go. Slides over top. Overlapped. It'll be easy to weld, easy to seam seal, looks good. Now on this one, I did put a little flange on it just to overlap this, but you can cut them even like that and butt weld them, so you could just butt them up together. I just wanted to get a little extra and overlap them. It has zero effect or matter. Do whatever you're comfortable with. So I assume if you've made it this far in the video, you've followed my prep steps, you've test fitted your panels, and you're just about ready to weld. The next step is going to be testing. And by testing, I mean practicing your welds and setting your ego aside so you don't mess up your floor pan. This is the almost finished product prior to welding. You'll notice I have this, it's basically a heat wrap for AN lines, oil lines, and I wrapped it around the bar because we're MIG welding the floor, and MIG welding creates spatter, and you do not want spatter on your chromoly tubing. You could TIG weld this if you wanted, but I don't feel like it. So we'll be MIG welding this. We're gonna stitch it. There's no reason to fully weld it. It is not a structural piece. All this is gonna do is allow us to seal the floor. So let me show you how we start practicing our welds before we apply it to the truck. So I know I didn't show you guys how to make the back filler piece for the more complicated front filler piece, but the back filler piece is actually the easiest patch of all of them in the truck. The reason I didn't show you is because I want you to try and figure it out for yourself, because if you follow along with every step I do, you're probably never going to learn anything. At least I don't. Sometimes you have to try it and try it and try it until you get it right. So because we chose MIG welding the floor pan patches, I'm going to be showing you how to set up specifically our Prime Weld MIG 285. In my opinion, the best bang for the buck welder you can get. This is a synergic welder, which means whenever you adjust voltage, it automatically adjusts wire speed. I don't really like that feature, but they added in the ability to adjust them both separately. So let me show you where we start. So typically, if you already have a welder, that is, a new one, it'll probably come with a sort of cheat sheet. It'll give you wire size, what gas you're using, how thick the metal is, and it'll give you an idea of what settings you need. We are using 030 wire, which is typically slightly big for sheet metal, but in the case of this older Chevy truck, it's 18 gauge, so it won't be an issue. So we know we're using 75% argon CO2, 030 wire, and it's roughly 18 gauge. That gives us 15.4 for voltage and 100 inches per minute of wire speed. That is where we're gonna start our test weld at and adjust from there. 15.4, 100. So here's our test piece. We just used leftover sheet metal, mainly because it was easy. It simulates what we're already doing. We're overlapping and we're gonna have a butt. It's also the same gauge. We prepped it similarly, but I intentionally left a lot more E-coat on it just to prove to you that you can and that it's good to do it. Now that we have a little test piece set up, we're gonna do a test weld on our 15.4 volts and 100 inches per minute and see how it goes. We're just gonna start with a tack and go from there. That was dog butt. Okay, let me try this one. Now that this tack was close, at 16 volts and 150 inches per minute, we're on the right track. Instead of raising the voltage, we're actually going to raise the wire speed another 25 inches per minute. If that tack turns out perfect, I'm going to show you how to set up the rest of the test weld. We're going to weld it fully, and when we're happy, we can move to the truck. In this instance, I'm using roughly 30 CFH of gas flow. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the material, how clean it is. But please make sure to test first, because it's going to suck if you have to cut all that back out inside the vehicle. Alrighty guys, I don't know if you heard that, but that's the sound we're going for. Fast tack, sounds good, it's clean. So, to set up and simulate the rest of this test weld, I have it cut and prepped to be as close to the floor as we can. We have a normal overlap, and then where we split it down the middle to fit around the tube, we have a butt. So we're gonna vice grip this on and stitch weld the rest of it together. I should note, on overlap welds, when you're looking through the helmet, you want your wire to essentially be right in this inner edge. And when you're doing, what I would recommend is a 1-inch stitch. You do your tack, and then you put your wire halfway on the other one so they're all overlapping. You notice how the heat input in the material is even. The start is a little cold, but as you keep welding, the metal's gonna get hotter and you're gonna have to start welding faster. So now that we've got a couple stitches on our overlaps, we're gonna go to the butt. The butt is a little trickier depending on how big your gap is, but you're kind of just sewing it together. Pick a side if your gap's big enough, and you're kind of just gonna start on one, sweep to the other. Go up, start on one side, sweep to the other. If your gap is close enough, you can just go in the middle, burn in a tack, go up, burn in another tack. And there you have it. If you noticed, I sped up during the end. The main reason was because we ran out of backing material, and when there's nothing behind your weld, the metal's gonna heat up a lot faster and there's gonna be a higher chance of burn through. Now if you see on the back here, you have ideal penetration. There's not too much metal deformation on the back, but you can still see where the weld fused. And same with the butt weld. You've completely fused both metals together, and that's what we're looking for. Now when we go do it in the truck, I can pretty much guarantee you it's not going to be as easy as your brand new fresh test pieces you just did, but at least you got a little bit of seat time and you'll have a lot less grinding to do. So before we weld this patch panel in, I wanted to give you a very important tip if you're new to fabrication or welding. Whenever you're welding any metal, but especially on sheet metal, any heat input you put into it is going to cause it to shrink. So when you are tacking up your piece, it's going to act like a magnet, right? So if I tack up this upper edge right here, it is going to suck the sheet metal towards the weld like a magnet. So weld here, it pulls the metal in. Why that matters is because if you don't have multiple tacks all around your workpiece and you decide to just bang out one side of it, you're gonna find that your patch panel doesn't fit anymore. So the more tacks you add, the more stable your piece is gonna be, and the more practice you get in welding and fabrication, the more you'll understand how metal moves and how to use that to your advantage. So now that we've got our bottom piece tacked up, stick your top one in there. Make sure she still fits. Come on. And tack this guy in. That's gonna suck. So now that you've got both pieces welded in, or tacked in I should say, you can run your 1-inch stitches. Now again, we're not fully perimeter welding this whole piece. It's not structural. We're going to be sealing it up with seam sealer. We just don't want this panel to move. So do your 1-inch stitches. You can leave a 1-inch gap or whatever you feel you need. So before we start welding the front side, I wanted to throw in a couple more tips. If you have tin foil, which I'm sure you probably do, so I wrap tin foil around the tubes. This is also a good anti-spatter barrier. Just don't stick your welding wire to it or it's gonna arc, so be careful. The next step that I can't believe I forgot to mention is if you don't have a bare chassis like I have, and you still have a engine, transmission, and ECU and battery all hooked up, please unplug your ECU and disconnect your battery before doing any welding. If you look on the bottom here, this is a rust-free Texas truck, but almost all OBS Chevys have a little bit of pitting and rust on the upper floorboard kick panel area. That's another reason we're MIG welding it, because I don't feel like dealing with that right now, and the MIG welder is going to burn right through it. This tin foil is really jerking me around. Feel free after you've tacked it to give her a couple taps if you need the metal to move somewhere. Alrighty guys, we got her all stitched up. As you can see, the next step is just going to be to grind these flush. You don't need to grind them completely away. We're going to seam seal them. Now again, if you're doing it this way, do not MIG weld this patch panel to a chromoly tube. We're just going to seam seal this. And the reason we didn't fully weld, especially in this joint right here where it meets the outer rocker, is because I may or may not someday have the intention of cutting the whole floor out for something else. So all we're doing is just trying to seal it up, but this is almost the end result. Next, we're going to grind these flush. We're going to epoxy prime this bare metal because that is the only correct way to prep bare metal. Then we're going to seam seal. So follow along. Alright guys, so the next step is seam sealer. We are seam sealing because we did not fully weld around the patch panels and we did not weld the bar to the patch panel. Seam sealer is a flexible protective barrier that keeps out moisture, fumes, debris, and because the cab still sits on cab mounts and the cage is welded to the frame, there's going to be a little bit of deflection and variation when you're riding down the road, so you want something that flexes. There is hundreds of different seam sealers out there. In my opinion, this is probably the best bang for your buck. AC Delco single part. It doesn't require any special tools. You can use a caulk gun, do a normal bead like you're laying down caulk, spread it around and let it dry, and then you can paint over top of it. The other option is a 2-part seam sealer. It costs about twice as much, but it is the nicest. Most 2 parts are an epoxy-based seam sealer. Some can go on bare metal. However, I always recommend that you epoxy prime under your seam sealer first. That way, if water were to ever get under your seam sealer, there wouldn't be rust. There's no problem with either seam sealer. These single parts are cheaper, and I would say they don't last as long. The 2 parts are quite a bit nicer. It just depends how much money you want to spend. Don't forget, you seam seal the top, but you still have to seam seal the bottom. This isn't a single layer floor. There's a cab mount back here. There's a cab mount in the front. So, on top of bare metal, epoxy, or any kind of primer is going to be better than nothing. Seam seal it, let it cure, top coat it, and you're done. This is the finished product. If you guys followed along with my instructions, or rather could understand my instructions, your end result should look like this. You can make it smoother and nicer looking if you take an extra 5 minutes and don't get finger happy swiping all the seam sealer away. But yeah, it's pretty simple once you get going. You might ruin a few patch panels like I did. Feel free to leave down in the comments how you guys would do it, any questions you guys have. And that wraps up this video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification button. That way you can keep up with our OBS build. We're doing a front suspension series soon with a K-member, rack and pinion, and control arms. Stay tuned for that. There's going to be a lot of good information and new parts that I'm sure some of you guys want to see. So thanks for watching.